Hi, my name is Jason Remington. My graduate research project is about RTI and its implementation and how attitudes affect implementation. I looked at 3 questions in my research project. First, what is RTI? Second is how attitudes and implementation, how do attitudes affect RTI? And the third question is, what are roles of counselors and administrators in the implementation process of RTI? There has been an increase in special education referrals. Is one of the, in fact, the change in numbers in learning disabilities between 1976 and 1990 is dramatic. There has been an influx of students in special education, and in fact, the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, they say that there has been since 1975, numerous studies and surveys have verified persistent patterns of disproportionate representation of students in special ed. In fact, especially with culturally and linguistic diverse students. So special ed numbers have risen in the last 20 years. One of the reasons for this is that the state directors say, one of the reasons is they say general education teachers refer students to special education because they do not have the training necessary to work with students who have difficulty in the classrooms. So they see referral as their only option. Okay. Also, they say that we can no longer afford to refer students because they frustrate us. So there's different reasons of why that the numbers have grown in special ed, and with this growth in special education, a movement has come about known as responsive intervention, which is a systemic program that is designed to intervene inside the classroom, inside the general education classroom. Okay, and one of the main goals of RTI is Yenny in 2009 says the result of one study suggests that RTI implementation is related to a reduction in referrals to special education. So they're trying to reduce special education. Also, Yenny continues saying it's also going to increase the percentage of children who demonstrate proficiency on state tests. So RTI has some benefits. And what is RTI? Well, if you look at the chart here, RTI is a 3-tiered program system. Okay? And here's the model. The first tier is divided in 3 tiers, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 is designed for all students. Okay, 100% of the students will receive this kind of instruction. Okay, all students. And this is the core curriculum, so all students are exposed to core curriculum. Now we know that not all students are going to get it. Okay, and those students that do not get it or are having difficulty with the core curriculum will receive, will begin their RTI process, and that is where the teacher will fill out different strategies, and then the teacher will monitor for 8 to 12 weeks in Tier 1 to see if those strategies are working. If not, they move to Tier 2, which is 20 to 30% of students. 20 to 30% of students move on to Tier 2, and they will receive additional instruction and different resources. Okay. Also, in Tier 2, the teacher meets with an RTI team, and the different teachers create new strategies that maybe that teacher didn't use in Tier 1. So it's more intensive intervention. If it's after 8 to 12 weeks it's not working, they go to Tier 3. And Tier 3 is only 5 to 10% of the students in the entire school. Okay, and this is where they will start being tested for special ed. They're going to be pulled out, after school tutoring, summer school, more involved in intense instruction. So that is what the RTI model looks like. Okay, it is 8 to 10 weeks in each tier, so you can see it's a longer process, and you can see how the tiers will be, how we keep them out of special ed. Before we let's refer to special ed right away. No, they go through these intervention and strategies first. So that's what RTI is. The second question that I look at is what is attitudes and how do the attitudes of teachers affect implementation of RTI. The first segment we looked at what RTI is. Now with all the things that a teacher has to do in RTI, the attitudes may not be pleasant at first, especially with all the kind of paperwork and things like that. There's been some studies that have shown that teachers, are kind of weary of implementing it. And in fact, La Roca in 2009 says that individual teachers, notably general education teachers, have primary responsibilities for intervening in tiers 1 and 2. Okay, but to do that, they have to embrace RTI and examine whether they are using research-based practices and likely modify their instruction and their teaching. The need to change current thinking and practice as is necessary in implementing RTI will likely elicit concerns, anxiety, and uncertainty. So there will be concerns, there will be anxiety, and there will be uncertainty with teachers. Okay, how do these concerns and anxieties affect implementation? Well, a survey was done that I looked at in a study, and this study looked at 2 schools, okay, School A and School B. Okay, School A had 18 professional staff, and School B had 30 professional staff. Okay, and both of them were ready to implement RTI. So the survey went out, okay, and it was a 7-point Likert scale that had 4 statements. Okay, that this is relevant, this is not true of me, this is true of me, and what they wanted to see if the level of concern in RTI, of teachers in RTI. So the results came back, and the results looked at and showed that teachers in the 91st percentile were unconcerned about RTI in School A. 91st percentile, they weren't even concerned with it. Okay, this was the fall survey. There was 2 surveys, fall and spring. This was the fall survey. In School B, 91% were also unconcerned with it. So the survey went out. They showed that they're unconcerned about RTI. In fact, they're more concerned of how it affects them personally. Okay, rather than on more information or management of RTI. But then in the spring, the survey was done again. This was after a year of implementation, a year of training, and it came back. Some of the teachers were still unconcerned, but it lessened. Okay, so for example, in School B, only 87% thought that were unconcerned, and it was a -5. Okay, so as the year went on, they became a little bit more concerned about it, and they also became more concerned about management. How do I manage RTI? How do I manage it? In fact, in the 73rd percentile, that's what management concerns were. So as the year went on, the spring survey showed that in the 73rd percentile, management was an important concern of theirs. So they started becoming more focused on, okay, what is this RTI and how do I manage it, rather than how is this going to affect me personally. Okay. A second study was done over on, this survey was given to administrators and psychologists on their attitudes toward RTI. Okay, this was in Minnesota area. 247 administrators and psychologists were surveyed, and this showed that this survey came back with interesting results. It showed a medium or positive correlation between knowledge and RTI implementation. So the more knowledge that psychologists and administrators had on RTI, the more willing they were to implement it. And that was the same as with attitudes. As the knowledge increased and the attitudes got better, they were more willing to implement RTI. The third question I looked at was, what is the role of school counselors or administrators or instructional teams in implementing RTI? We just looked at the concerns or the attitudes, how that was important. Well, one thing, La Roca says that educational leaders such as administrators and psychologists and counselors might begin implementation of RTI by assessing teacher concerns. Gauging the status of teacher feelings and thoughts can provide leadership teams with a starting point for their interventions. So there is a need to support teachers in this environment, this intervention environment. So counselors, their role is to provide support. Another thing that LaRocca stated was that leadership team interventions should include collection, analysis, and interpretation of data, which in turn can provide teachers with confirming or disconfirming information about whether their own instruction is working. So as counselors, as administrators, they can provide data to the teachers saying, okay, this intervention is working. Look at the data, look at the test results. They can also provide support as far as telling them different instructional strategies, providing information there. So any kind of support that administrators and counselors can give toward teachers regarding RTI will be hugely critical, because they will feel supported through this system. So the teachers may feel lost at times, and counselors and administrators will be able to support that by showing them data and helping them through these processes until they become more familiar with RTI. So my graduate research project looked at those three questions. First, what is RTI? Second, how do our attitudes affect RTI and its implementation? Then what can counselors do and administrators do in providing support for RTI? Okay, and that is my graduate research project. Thank you.